Thank you so much for coming here. I'm very humbled and grateful. And this is my second time doing Ask the Doc. I did it last year, and I had so much fun that I almost nudged and waited and told Denise, like, when is the next time that I get to do Ask the Doc? The reason why Ask the Doc at CBC is such a unique and exciting opportunity for me is because I think historically mental health world and spiritual realm did not mix well together, right? It was a lot like oil and water. You can shake it up, but historically they just did not go along. One world didn't understand the other world, right? Historically, church said emotions bad, don't trust your feelings, right? Or even nowadays, I think in church say, capture every thought captive, and thought is bad, right? But I think if we understood one world, because God has a mind, he has emotions, he has behaviors and actions, right? And all the characters in the Bible are beings like us that had thought, emotions, and behaviors. And I think if we applied our understanding of mental health to the Bible, I think it can really merge the two, and it can have a pretty groovy experience of really knowing the fullness of God. The reason why I'm so passionate too is that division within the church about accepting mental health issues or mental health in general and not mixing the spiritual, biblical perspective, I think is the biggest lie and a trap that the enemy has. Because you can't really experience God in a real way. There's that chain that has to be broken to really understand God that much deeper. So that's why I'm so passionate to speak at churches or spiritual gatherings, because I think it is possible to understand God and feel God in a very intimate way, as intimate as our thoughts and emotions can be in our bodies. So that's my passion. And thank you so much for being here. Before I start, I just want to pray, because I believe that I'm here for a reason. And I know that each of you guys are here for a reason, and God orchestrated everybody in the same room. And I know that I try my best, but I know that ultimately God is author of this presentation, and he's the author of your life, and we're just meeting here. And I know that it's a divine, holy place. So let me just pray. Dear God, thank you for this opportunity to really share who you have been in my life through my past, present, and future. And I know that each one of us here has a story, and I know that you are there. I just hope that your love, grace, and truth will help us discern where you were in our past, so that you can be with us in the present, so that you can be with us in the future. I created this presentation. I did my best, but ultimately I know that you're going to use it for your glory and not mine. And I just pray that if there's anybody in this room who is tired, who feels lonely or confused, or maybe they're fine outside, but they're just really trying so hard to look okay outside, I pray that this place becomes a safe place for them, so that when they hear my talk, that they'll be seen and they'll be heard and they'll be understood. And ultimately that they feel and know that they can go to you. Bless this time together, and help us have fellowship and spiritual and mental intimacy together. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. So today's objective, we're going to understand concepts of cognitive behavioral therapy. And cognitive behavioral therapy is, you'll see when you talk to a therapist, you say CBT, ARP, all these, alphabet soups of therapy, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy is one of most evidence-based therapy, and you can use it for PTSD or anxiety and depression. But under the umbrella of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, there's concepts of how to understand how our mind works, okay? And I'm going to be kind of trying to bring it to life, those concepts for you. So some of the concepts like cognitive triad, core belief, which is like our main topic here, and importance of parent-child attachment to one's thoughts and perspectives. And 2, understand how our past, especially our childhood, affects our perception of God, ourselves, and the world. And we're going to do a scripture case study of Moses. I'm not a professional Bible teacher, but I just want to read the Exodus with a psychiatrist's perspective and really extract some of the concepts in the Bible and see if it's true or not, how it works. Okay. So this is a disclaimer. Denise kind of touched on it. This presentation is for information, education, and empowerment purposes. For specific personal cases, I would recommend that you go to your physician or mental health provider, and that our interaction in public speaking does not constitute a patient-physician relationship. So what is a cognitive triad? So cognitive triad is a triangle, right? And in the each point, you'll see thought, behavior, and emotions. And so you'll see that the arrows go both directions in 3 points, right? And just to emphasize that thoughts and emotions and behaviors all have a chain reaction to each other in all the different ways. And a lot of times, this cognitive triad is triggered by a situation, like an event, life event, okay? Failing a test, getting a new job, getting a new car, all these situations triggers this wheel, and it's almost like it spins the wheel, okay? So it spins. Now, I'm gonna give you an example, but you'll understand that this wheel spins like hundreds of times a day because each situation spins another triad, and it's like continuous, okay? A lot of times we don't even know that it's spinning. It's like automatic knee-jerk reaction, but it does spin. So let me kind of give you an example of how it spins. So let's say that you study for a test and you failed it. You tried your best and you failed the test. So that's the situation that will trigger a cognitive triad wheel spin. So scenario number one, let's say a person number one have a thought, I studied so hard and I didn't get anything out of it, I'm a failure. And then emotions might be discouraged, ashamed, right? Mad, right? It'll lead to the behavior of, screw this, I'm not gonna study for any test ever in my life, right? And they're not interested in, academic success anymore. So that's the scenario number one, okay? I've been there. I don't know if you've been there, right? Okay. Scenario number two, let's say that you study for the test really hard and you still failed, right? But person number one can have, let's start with the emotion. They might be shocked and confused why they failed the test because they study so hard. But a thought could be, well, I try my best and that matters more than the score. And then what will it be a behavior? They're not going to give up on everything, right? They might go to a teacher for extra help, like go over the questions that they missed and maybe go over the concepts. So with the same situation, you have completely different scenario, completely different behavioral outcome, right? And why is that? It's a core belief. Now you might be wondering, what is a core belief? So core belief, definition-wise, is a fundamental, absolute, and lasting comprehension that a person develops about him or herself, others, and the world. Constructed from the effort of extracting meaning from significant childhood or formative experiences, grouped into categories and form relatively stable cognitive systems, which serve as a basis for processing and interpreting new information. So I underlined like the big ideas. It's a lasting impression that life events give you, okay? So life events happen, situations triggers the cognitive triad, and it kind of is like a Tetris blocks, right? It starts to pile up. So a bunch of experiences makes a lasting impression on who you are, who others are, and what the world is. And this becomes a basis of interpreting new life events. Are you guys kind of tracking? Okay. So it starts to become your core belief about yourself in your core. So this is how I like to kind of imagine. We talked about the wheel spins, right? Cognitive triad, new situations, new life events. But it's like a spiral case. It has a direction. It can either, if we're using staircases as an example, you can go down or up. So core belief is almost like a magnetic pull. It has a gravitational pull towards where the cognitive triad is going to spin. And that's the difference between scenario number one and scenario number two with the same event. So scenario number one had a cognitive core belief that I'm a failure. And that's why one event automatically went to, I'm a failure. What's the point, right? So how does a core belief come to exist? We kind of talked about how our past experiences kind of affect our current, mindset and mind core belief. So when a patient comes to my office, they usually come in this point of their life, right? I mean, I do see kids too, but a lot of times, if you see the timeline, there's, pregnancy, birth, childhood, and earthly death. I just put a point there. Somewhere in the adulthood, they're depressed, they're anxious, they're tired, they don't know what's happening. I emphasized earthly death. Maybe it's because I'm a child psychiatrist, but I put a very heavy emphasis on childhood because I do believe that core belief is true. So I always ask about their childhood, what happened, and even how did you feel at home, right? Like, did you feel safe? If something bad happened, can you go to your parents? All these questions kind of helps me kind of transport myself into their mind in that childhood. How did it feel, right? Because understanding the childhood would help me understand what is their core belief kind of going to be, okay? So let's just kind of take a hypothetical patient example. Let's say that after birth, the child had some kind of learning disability that was not, visible outside, right? Let's say that it was dyslexia or dyscalculia or something. And they always did not do well. They were developmentally delayed, not past, needing speech path, like having trouble at school. And they just didn't know why. Parents didn't really know what's going on. And because of this academic stress and not failing, parents fought a lot because of the child. If this child goes through this kind of life events, it's easy to kind of understand the child says, I'm stupid, there's something wrong with me, and I'm a burden because I'm causing my parents to fight all the time. Now, let's say that child kind of grows up to be an adolescent. By this time, let's say that the school caught up and diagnosed dyslexia, but by then, maybe one too many failure, one too many Fs, and they're like, you know what, school's not for me, it's not fun. By now, dyslexia is diagnosed and school's helping, but they're not interested, and then maybe the parent and teacher says, you're just lazy, you're not applying yourself, you're getting help, like what more can we do for you, right? Like some kind of tone, right? And maybe we sprinkle some bullying here and there, getting made fun of that they're different or talking a little bit funny, and they go to their parents, and maybe parents respond, well, what did you do? Or, like, what do you want? We're tired or something like that, right? And they hear that. And in that adolescence, they lose interest in success. They go to the parent for support. Teacher is saying that they're lazy and stupid, So what that core belief settles in again a little bit harder, right? Concrete kind of hardens into I'm stupid, right? And now impression of the world is nobody's going to help me. Nobody's listening. No matter how hard I try, they're not going to give me benefit of the doubt. And those kind of core beliefs starts to cement and harden, as the life goes on. So in those life events, can you kind of visualize how many cognitive triads spins, right? And then it starts to, as it spins, there's that pull to have a core belief, something about yourself and others, right? Now, how is that teenager going to grow up, right? If you have a core belief, I'm a failure, nobody listens to me, nobody cares, and nobody's going to believe in me. They might have some successes, but it's interesting because successes are not going to shine in their eyes so much. The failure is going to seem bigger than the successes in their life, right? And then every failure is going to be a reminder of what they believe about themselves. And it's interesting. It's twofold, right? So failure seems bigger, but also it's kind of like self-sabotage, because now you're seeing the evidence of your worst fear. And it kind of becomes like a dead end a lot of times. And then settles into hopelessness. Oh, see, this is why I'm a failure. This is why. See, like now my wife divorced me. One person I trust left me, right? Like it piles up on now more evidence of what you actually believed and feared about yourself. And usually that's kind of where the crisis happens, okay? But I just want you to see that when patients kind of come to my office, or when patients are depressed and anxious, it did not happen overnight. It didn't. And I want to just emphasize that it kind of starts from the past, way past. So these are some of the common core beliefs that I see. I'm a burden. I'm a failure. Real me is unlovable. right? So real me is unlovable, so I have to make up something. I have to kind of put on a mask. I can't trust anyone. I'm worthless. There's something wrong with me. People don't really care about me. These are very common core beliefs, okay? And I want to just share a little bit about my life. It's kind of mini testimony. I grew up in a Christian church, but there was a lot of emphasis on being better, doing better, looking better, right? So if I had adolescent acne, it was a big deal, right? And everybody would comment on it. I'll notice it. If I gained weight, it would be a big deal, right? Certain size, like shoe size or pant size, everything became a measure of comparison, and if it was B plus, then there's A plus, right? So there was not a lot of celebration, but continuous drive for perfection. And even with good intent, I always thought that I was being measured and I was never good enough, right? There's always somebody who's better than me. And because, I immigrated from Korea when I was 10 and I was oldest of the three. So there was a lot of culture shock, that kind of had to buffer, right? And I was oldest of the three. And there was a lot of roles that I had to play in the family that was a little bit more supportive than my age appropriate roles, right? And it seemed as though the whole world was on my shoulder, right? And I felt like I was responsible for everything, right? And merge that to, I'm not good enough. I always have to aim for perfection and I'm responsible for everything. Just a lot of burden, right? I just kind of felt like, I was never going to be good enough. And, I would like to say that in my life, there were some good moments too. There was a lot of success and achievements, but it's almost like a sunglasses. You can't really look through objectively your life when all these life events kind of piles on you and start to kind of change your core belief about yourself and other people. You really can't really escape that, So, that spiral of core belief, it started kind of spiraling down and mixed with kind of raised in church. I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's like, being depressed is a choice, right? Suicide is selfish, right? Like all these kind of things, right? Tattoos are bad, and how dare you pierce your ears, right? Like all these little things kind of added up, where slowly being raised at church with this kind of change in my core belief, I started to interpret God in this way. My core belief and sunglasses started to see God this way because that was how he was portrayed. That's what he told me, through the Bible, right? So this was my thought about God when I was about, 15, 16. Everything is my job and I have to do it perfectly. There's no forgiveness. I have to prove myself. It's a burden to be God's child because there's always more things to do, right? Or things not to do. God really doesn't care about what I want to do, and God doesn't care what I think. It all kind of spiraled down to core belief. And even at the moment of when I was 16, I just kind of told God, if you exist, the people who represent you, it's like impossible, and if this is you, I don't want anything to do with you, like it just seemed like this unforgiving, horrible boss, who you get called to his office and there's another stack of work to do. There's no good jobs, there's no celebration. It's just more work to do. And I just didn't want to work for that guy, right? So I left church and I left God for a year. And I'll kind of wrap it up. My testimony kind of comes back on what God did with that. But let me just kind of take a pause and talk about, just like I talked about in my testimony, there's an importance of childhood, right? And the home interactions that you have, right? And let me kind of bring that in a little bit. So core belief, I think we understand it. Cognitive triad, I think we understand it. Now, how is that linked with parenting, like your home life, okay? So this is from attachment theory. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's kind of like a popular word now. So the psychoanalyst Bowlby had this attachment theory, and it's basically a little bit related to core belief, but the importance of the caregiver's role in forming the core belief for the baby. So infants draw on experiences with the caregivers to develop internal attachment representations or working models of themselves and others in relationship, which shapes the expectations about future relationships. And it's the beliefs about whether others will be consistently available or not, and whether they will be responsive and caring or cold and rejecting. Beliefs about whether he or she was worthy of receiving love and care, and about the value of close relationships. So it just kind of adds another layer of the core belief formation and the importance of the parent giver, right? But the interesting thing is that not only does it have a core belief in the baby's mind, but it actually shapes the sense of worth and value, right? So I just want to kind of pause here. We're going to talk about attachment theory, but I want to share a trigger warning. I'm not sure if any one of you guys have kids, if you're a parent. A lot of times when I give a talk like this, my first instinct is, oh, I'm not a good parent, and this is the reason why, right? Like attachment theory told me that I didn't do right with my kids, right? But I want to pause and really want you to just next 30 minutes talk about you, not as a parent, but as a child. I want you to go back to that little you, and we want to explore that little you, because my guess is that little you didn't get a lot of attention and reflection. So if it is possible, I want you to kind of think about the little you and your childhood, not your kid's childhood. Okay, we can assess that later, but first we need to honor little you. Okay, so this is an ideal parenting a child needs to have secure attachment. So this diagram, the two hands in there is kind of parents. There's open hand, just like Pastor Ed says, is open hand to surrender and receive, right? And it represents a secure base and safe haven for the kids. Now, I'm remembering back in my newborn days, newborns are completely attached, right? Attached for everything. But as the baby starts to grow, they need to explore and be somewhat practice their independence, right? So as a parent, it's going to be staying as a secure base, but it's going to support the exploration and independence of the baby, right? And watch them, make sure that they're safe, delight in their independence and exploration, help them if they need it, and then just really celebrate. And let's say that kid is dangling from a tree. Let's say that the kid falls, right? And hits on their butt, right? And then there's pain, and they need to run back to the mom, right? And mom or dad has to receive them welcomely. And some of the important points is to protect me, comfort me, delight in me, and organize my feelings. And it's a safe place. So kid falls, comes back, gets comforted, they go out, right? And then the older they get, they go further and further and further, right? This safe haven and secure base is an ideal parenting. Availability, consistency, attentiveness. It's interesting though, because let's go back to our hypothetical patient's life in there. Underneath, I kind of drew an arrow there, your earthly caregiver's influence. So now we know what the ideal parenting is and how important that is in forming the core belief. Now let's take this life. Let's say that they still have dyslexia, but what if that earthly parent was like, hey, don't measure your worth with that, right? What you don't know, we'll figure it out. I'm with you. Versus, I don't know what's wrong with you. Why don't you get this, right? Two parents' influences can really shape the core belief. So I put the arrow there because in the beginning, the younger the child is, more dependent they are on parents' interpretations, right? And organizations of their core beliefs. But it kind of fades away. But I said the influence kind of fades away, but now we know that core belief, once it's formed in childhood, is really hard to get rid of and reinterpret in adulthood, right? So this diagram kind of shows what would the person in the adulthood life be like based on what the parents did, right? Even if the situations were the same. It could really be a very different scenario, just like the cognitive triad scenario that we compared, how the parent interpret and ground the child in life events, it can really make and break them. So if it is okay with you, I'm not a professional Bible teacher, but I do want to read Exodus and study Moses' life. I'm going to read some excerpts, okay? All right. So Exodus 1:8. So now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if the war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape the land. So therefore they set the taskmasters over them and afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh two store cities, Pithom and Ramses. And the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. Verse 13, I'm just going to kind of skip over. For they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter and with hard service, with mortar and brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. And then later, the king of Egypt says, he commands the Hebrew midwives to kill the boys that are born to the Hebrew wives, right? But the midwives didn't, right? They made an excuse and they didn't kill the boys. And verse 22, then Pharaoh commanded all his people. So all the Egyptians are now getting this, command. Every son that is born to a Hebrew, you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. So this is a place so Moses was born in the era of slavery and genocide. This is not really the safe place to be a baby or be a Hebrew in that matter. So now a man from the house of Levi went and took as wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket. And we know this, he made the basket and the sister followed him to see what's done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river while her young women walked beside the river. So she saw the basket and she opened it. It was a child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. And then the sister popped out and said, oh, shall I go and call you a nurse from a Hebrew woman to nurse a child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So the girl went and called the child's mother. And the Pharaoh daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. And when the child grew older, she brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, because she said, I drew him out of the water. So I'm going to just kind of put my psychiatrist goggles on and just kind of tell you what I see. Okay. So he was a fine child. That word fine is good. Like there's no deformities in the child. This is the same good as when God created the world. God said it was good. So there's no deformity in the child. He was hidden until he couldn't be hidden anymore. And I don't know about you, but when I had my baby, it was a moment of celebration. It was not a moment to hide and suppress, And I'm just kind of thinking, if the baby's crying, you're like, shh, shh, shh. Don't make loud noises. And again, this is not a safe time. And the baby's birth was actually a risk for the whole family. The baby was born and it created a safety risk for the whole family. And then when the Pharaoh's daughter, sent him away with the biological mom, is interesting too, because so she was nursed with mom and she got paid for it, which is an interesting detail in the Bible, right? So mother's love, there's money to it. Not saying that Moses will count it against her, but that's a little bit not natural, right? And then transplanted back to the Pharaoh's household. So Moses' childhood is a lot of moving around. There's no consistency. There's no home. His biological mom nursed you, but now she sent you away. Like, how is the child supposed to interpret that? And, named Moses by Pharaoh's daughter. And the word Moses means drawn out of the water, rescued. What if your name was adopted, rescued, right? Fostered. That was his name. I'm going to kind of skip forward. Okay, so that's his childhood. Okay, maybe Moses was too young to remember to formulate his own core beliefs, but that was a background of his birth and childhood. Okay, but what the Bible says later about Moses and the choice of words that Bible has is very interesting as well. So I'm going to continue with chapter 2:11. So one day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens. So this is very interesting to me because he now grew up in a Pharaoh's household, but he identified with Israelites. How did he know that he's an Israelite? Maybe it was made pretty clear that he was an Israelite being raised in a Pharaoh's household. Do you understand that? So he was adopted, but not really adopted as their own. It was adopted to give you shelter and food and clothing, but his identity was made known clear. You're not one of us, right? So he saw an Egyptian beating the Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And then he went out the next day. Behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, why do you strike your companion? He said, who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, surely the thing is known. And when Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian when he sat down by the well. So he empathized with his people. This is who he identifies with, right? Growing up with affluence, that they didn't have, but he still had compassion for them. He tries to help them out, right? By killing the Egyptian, right? Killing a person with that strike kind of tells me maybe he has some built-in anger, right? That's a big strike. But he tried to help out his people that he identified with. The next day, he tries to help out his people again, but now they scorn him, they reject him. They're like, who do you think you are? You're in the Pharaoh's house. You don't know us. You don't identify with us, right? Are you going to kill me too? So his intention to help, his identity with them, right, is all rejected by his own people that he thought he could relate. He thought he could help. Let me just say, were there any times in your life that you try to help out people and they completely missed your heart, and said, get away. Like, you're no help. You're a burden. This is what Moses felt. And which is really interesting too. So then everything found out, and Pharaoh, when he heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. So this kind of makes me think, so he grew up in a Pharaoh's household, but when he found out that Pharaoh found out that his family member killed an Egyptian taskmaster, the death of the taskmaster is more important than somebody in his own household. That kind of emphasized again, even in that household, it was pretty clear that Moses was not one of the Egyptians. Do you understand that? So do you understand the tension in the childhood, the setting, how he was raised inside the Pharaoh's house, right? Now it's starting to make sense, right? And now Moses fled both his adoptive family, his biological cultural family. He has nowhere else to go. So the next, chapter or so is a back and forth between Moses and God. And this is when you'll find Moses' core belief pop out. And I'm going to point them out to you and then it will start to make sense from what we extrapolated from his childhood and upbringing. Just a pointer here. So he ran away and then he went to land of Midian, right? And then he helps out a girl, the shepherd girl. And then the father is like, oh, you're so back early. Like, how come? And then she says, oh, this Egyptian helped us. So it's like, for me, it's interesting. It's like, oh, he's an Israelite raised in the Egyptian family, and the outsider thinks he's an Egyptian. So he's kind of mixed, right? He's not really identified with either. The shepherds came, and the father of rule said, what are you doing? Invite him, right? This is the first time that Moses was invited to anything. And then he settles there and marries a girl. Okay? Interesting life history, right? It's the first time that he was welcomed. So now Moses is keeping the flock for his father-in-law. So this is chapter 3. Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock in the west side in the wilderness. And he sees a burning bush, and he's like, oh, what's going on there? Let me just take a peek. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, so the Lord is paying attention to Moses. That's what parents do. You're attentive. Oh, yep, I know what he's doing. Let me go to him, right? And God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And then he said, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is the holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father. First time that he claimed your father. You have a place, you have a family, and you're mine. Do you understand that? God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And then the Lord said, I see it and hear the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and heard their cry because of their taskmasters. And I'm going to skip kind of forward to verse 9. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I've also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So you see already God being the parent that he never had. He's paying attention. He calls to him, come. Moses never heard come, right? I will send you. And it's interesting that Moses replies, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Who am I? I'm nobody. Everybody rejected me. The people rejected me. So who am I, right? But God says, but I will be with you, right? Just like when a child is scared or feeling not confident to do something, parent says, I'll be with you. I'll go. Let's do this together, right? And this shall be the sign for you that I have sent for you. So there's a back and forth, and God starts giving Moses promises and multiple signs to prove that he is from God. And he says, you shall serve God on this mountain. This is your home. This is your secure base. You will come back to me and you will be with me, right? And then, but it's interesting, right? This kind of shows you how stubborn and lasting core belief is, because Moses will continue. So imagine you're talking to God with this burning bush. He's giving you signs, right? Like your hand has leprosy. Now it doesn't. Your stick turns into snake and now it's not, right? But this is how sticky core belief is. And then Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. People don't listen to me, God, right? They don't trust me. They don't trust my intentions. They don't know where I'm from, right? And then in the chapter 4, verse 8, if they will not believe you or listen to you from the first sign, then they'll believe the latter sign. So God keeps on giving him proofs that this is a seal that you're with me. But chapter 4, verse 10, but Moses said to the Lord, oh, my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to the servant, for I'm slow in speech of tongue. I'm not the man for the job. I can't do it. I think you got the wrong guy, right? And then God says to him, who made the man's mouth? Who made him mute? Who makes him mute, deaf, or seeing, or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? And this is when God says, I'm the parent. You're the child. I'm bigger than you. I can do this through you. So now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. So I'll literally be there with you and teach you every single word that has to come out of your mouth. But Moses says, but he said, oh, my Lord, please send someone else. It's like, I got it. I got your point, but I still don't want to do it. Right? And then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And this is when the parents can rejoice that being angry with your kid is not a sin. God was angry with Moses. And if you look at the anger, it means nostril. Like how many times do you get mad with your kid that your nostril starts, flaring, right? And is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he's coming out to meet you. And this is interesting as a psychiatrist perspective because so when biological mother nursed him, transplanted him back to Pharaoh, right? I'm guessing that he didn't know where his biological family was because God is connecting Aaron and Moses back together. So they're gone. So now Moses had literally no group of family members around, but God is bringing together. And sometimes God does this, and God usually does this, where you're not going to be just supported by me, but I'm going to bring someone else in your life. He always connects people because he knows that there's a power of sense of belonging and fellowship. Amen. And you know what? When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. For the first time, or maybe the second time, another human being was glad to see him, right? And you shall speak to him and put words in his mouth, and I'll be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach both of you what to do. This is very interesting to me too, because a lot of times we think God is going to choose somebody that's more competent than me. Aaron is obviously more competent than Moses is to speak. But God doesn't forget that he chose Moses. God doesn't choose you out of your qualities and strengths. He chooses you because you're you. And he doesn't forget that order, and he doesn't forget that choice, because he shall speak to you, he shall speak for you to the people. He shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. God never forgot that he chose Moses. He did not say, oh, okay, fine, you don't want to do it, forget it. I'll just choose Aaron. He'll be glad to do it. He likes speaking anyways. He does not do that. He says, I'm choosing you. And this is what God's mission is. He wants to go to your heart, take out that core belief, and replace it with his grace and truth. That was the whole point of this back and forth. God was angry with Moses. He was annoyed with Moses because that core belief was so stinking stubborn. But God did not give up, because God wanted to change Moses' core belief. God is saying, you are mine. I came for you. Come to me. I'm with you. I will prove that you're mine. You and I will be together, serving together in this mountain. I'll continue to claim and prove to the unbelievers and haters that you are mine. Multiple miracles and blessings and anointings are on your way to prove that God is with you. I am able. I will teach you and guide you. I care about what you do and say, and it can affect me emotionally. And this is a point that I wanted to kind of say. When God's anger is kindled with his people, a lot of times, they say, well, God said, God is slow to anger. Why does he get angry? It's because we have power and we have intimacy with God. God cares about what we do and say about him. Now that my kids are a little bit older, they say things like, I hate you, mommy, right? Sometimes I'm like, okay, whatever. But sometimes it hits differently, right? So I'm like, why did you say that, right? And I get sad. I get sad and I get mad. And my emotional reaction it has nothing to do sometimes with my lack of control with my emotions. It shows me that I care about what he thinks about me. And this is exactly what God's anger is. He cares about what you think about him. You will not only have my support, but other support. You are still chosen to do this job, and I still choose you. Even if you're less qualified, even if you don't want to do it, I choose you. So let me kind of go back to these events. And let me just kind of ask you to think about your childhood events. What if God went to your heart and your past and each life moments that shaped your core belief? What if he starts interpreting it his way and he starts putting his truth and love in every single event? What would happen to your present core belief today? And testimony of my life, I told you that around age 16 and 17, I kind of gave up on God and his people, right? People that represented him. And I said, no, you're a horrible boss. Like, I'm too tired, right? So I left. But I got saved around age 17. And what he did in my life was, as my earthly caregiver's influence and my core beliefs started to kind of tease apart, he started to rewrite my core belief. And what he did to me through help with therapy and supportive relationships that he gave me, he went back to the past and started rewriting and reinterpreting my life events so that it's not the direction and gravitational pull changed. It's not I'm a burden and I have to be perfect. I'm never good enough. It changed, So I don't know if you noticed when I was praying is that this presentation is not perfect, but now I'm okay with it. Before me would have been like, oh, like I have to do perfect words and stuff. But now I know that God is my parent, just like he's going to give me the words to say, and I might slip, I might stutter. It doesn't matter. And I have that freedom because he wrote my core belief into I am enough. I showed up today, and that's good. And this attachment theory, I just want to encourage you that God is a perfect parent. Sometimes God gets interpreted not as this parent. Sometimes God gets interpreted into a Pharisee, somebody that you couldn't go to, and somebody that you kind of have to perform, right? Somebody who watches over you like Santa Claus, right? Who knows who's nice and naughty, right? Who's on the good list and bad list. But I just want you to know that just like God wrestled with Moses' core belief, he's more than willing to wrestle with your core beliefs. And he will rewrite your core belief to be, I'm his child. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize two things. When God was rewriting my story, and I was still battling with this core belief of I'm not enough, I still did outside churchy stuff. I still did InterVarsity Christian Fellowship at college. I still taught Bible studies. I still did a lot of things. But you know what was interesting? And I didn't know that I had this core belief because I said, oh, Bible says that Jesus saved me, so I'm his child. It was all head knowledge, right? And I was doing outside things. But you know, one of the interesting thing of how subtle and how deep the core belief is that one of my college friends, when I went to her bachelorette party, she told me, Eugene, you're not as angry as you were in college. So this is to you to say that core belief is deep and it kind of surfaces up and you might not even know it, you know, but it does have an effect, and it really takes a lot of effort and support a safe space and therapy to really dig like what's really going on in here. You might not even know, like surface level. And the second thing that I wanted to say is just because your core belief is getting rewritten to be I'm his child doesn't mean that bad things are not going to happen. You might still struggle with depression. You might still struggle with, you know, alcoholism. You might still have anger issues, just like me, right? I was angry and I was getting rewritten. I had no idea what the problem was, but you'll still have problems. But the beauty of it all is, where is your secure base? Where is your safe haven? That's what it's all about. Yes, you'll explore sobriety, and you might mess up, but you can always come back to him because he'll always be there. And he'll organize your thought. Hey, what happened? It's okay. You're still my child. And over again, over mistakes and exploration and independence, you're going to go back to him, and he's going to reorganize your thoughts, reorganize your emotions, protect you, comfort you, and delight in you. So my question to you is, you know, I know that everybody's coming from different salvation background, you know, or different religious background or spiritual background, but are you open to letting God reparent you and shape your core belief? Thank you.